Welcome to the Paper 3 Political Ideas revision video on feminism. In this video, we will be looking at to what extent is the state a problem for feminists. Here's a reminder of the four themes on Paper 3. Today we are going to be focusing on the state. Nearly all people live under the jurisdiction of one state or another. Political ideologies therefore have adopted principles about the nature of the state, what part, if any, it should play in society, how it should be controlled, and whether it is a force for good or evil. So what is the feminist viewpoint on the state? Well, feminists do not have a distinctive theory of the state, unlike socialists, liberals, and even conservatives. It is true that socialist feminists see the state as the agent of capitalism, and since capitalism naturally exploits women, the state is the ultimate architect of such exploitation. But this criticism is indirect and restricted to socialist feminism only. The main characteristics of the modern state that concerns feminists relates to the patriarchy. Liberals largely point to the reluctance of the state to address the inferior position of women. Why should they when they are themselves dominated by men? Nevertheless, if governments are seen as part of the problem, liberals also see them as part of the solution. Indeed, the feminist movement has made huge strides in improving the position of women through legislation and changes in the nature of state-run education. Examples include equality laws and constitutional principles, such as developments that are designed to impose the principle of gender equality in the public sphere. Most modern states have such principles enshrined. There is also anti-discrimination legislation, which virtually all modern states have outlawed discrimination against women, either in law or in constitutional principles. There are laws imposing equal pay regulations. This is enshrined in the European Union law, for example. There are also laws dealing with domestic violence, both physical and psychological in the UK, as well as rape within marriage. The imposition of various kinds of awarenesses are programmes in school curricula, and in some cases, female quotas have also been introduced. These are all examples of how liberal feminists see the government and the state as being helpful in changing women's positions. Radical feminists, meanwhile, view such developments as welcome but also superficial. Such reforms do not address the more fundamental problem of the systematic nature of discrimination, exploitation, and inequality. Patriarchy is more pervasive than these reforms suggest. These problems are deeply rooted in patriarchal culture, and this means that the state is powerless to combat them, especially as it is a patriarchal institution itself. We're going to take a look at how the different strands view the state in more detail now, starting with liberal feminists. Firstly, they have a huge focus on equality. Liberal feminists emphasise the importance of gender equality and believe that the state should play a crucial role in promoting and safeguarding equal rights and opportunities for women. They also place a huge focus on legal means. Liberal feminists advocate for legal reforms that ensure gender equality. They argue for the removal of discriminatory laws and the implementation of legislation that promotes equal treatment in areas such as employment, education, and healthcare. One prominent example of equal pay legislation is the Equal Pay Act of 1963 in the USA. This legislation prohibits wage discrimination based on sex, requiring that men and women receive equal pay for equal work in jobs that require equal skill, effort, and responsibility. The Act provides a legal framework for individuals to file claims if they believe they are being paid unfairly due to their gender. In other countries, similar laws have been enacted to address the gender pay gap. For instance, in the United Kingdom, the Equality Act of 2010 includes provisions on equal pay, making it unlawful for employers to pay men and women differently for doing the same job or work of equal value. Then there's equal representation. Liberal feminists push for equal representation of women in political institutions and decision-making processes. They advocate for affirmative action policies to address historical gender imbalances in politics. Liberal feminists emphasise individual autonomy and freedom of choice. They argue that the state should protect women's rights to make decisions about their bodies, reproductive choices, and personal lives. And lastly, liberal feminists believe that the state should intervene to address systemic gender inequalities and provide social support systems. They support policies such as affordable healthcare, paid parental leave, and equal pay legislation. Now let's look at how a radical feminist views the state. The patriarchy is a big theme for radical feminists, as they argue that gender oppression is deeply rooted in patriarchal systems and structures. They believe that the state is a key instrument in upholding and perpetuating patriarchal norms, and therefore must be fundamentally transformed. Radical feminists advocate for a radical restructuring of society to challenge and dismantle patriarchal power structures. They argue that the state should play an active role in eradicating gender equality and promoting women's liberation. Radical feminists propose the existence of a dual system theory, which says there are two distinct systems of power, patriarchy and capitalism. They argue that the state is complicit in both systems and calls for a feminist revolution that challenges the patriarchal capitalist nexus. Radical feminists also prioritise grassroots activism and community organising as a means of effecting societal change. They believe in building autonomous women's spaces and institutions outside of mainstream structures to challenge patriarchal norms. One notable example is the refugee movement that emerged during the second wave of feminism in the 1970s. Inspired by radical feminist principles, they established women's shelters across various countries, including the United States and the UK. Lastly, radical feminists emphasise collective action and solidarity among women to challenge the oppressive structures of the patriarchy. They advocate for women's self-organisation and empowerment, rejecting the notion that the state can adequately represent women's interests. This was seen in 2017 with the Women's March movement as a response to the inauguration of President Trump. It started as a single protest in Washington, D.C., but quickly became a global movement with millions of participants in cities around the world. The Women's March aimed to highlight the intersecting issues of gender inequality, sexism, racism, and other forms of oppression. Radical feminists played a significant role in organising and mobilising the Women's March movement, as they emphasised the power of collective action and solidarity among women to challenge the oppressive structures of patriarchy and address various social issues. Lastly, we have social feminists. Let's look at how they view the state. Social feminists argue that capitalism and patriarchy are interconnected systems of oppression. They believe that the state as an institution within the capitalist society perpetuates gender inequality and should be transformed to address both economic and gender-based exploitation. Socialist feminists prioritise economic justice and advocate for policies that challenge economic inequalities. They argue that the state should play a central role in ensuring fair wages, equal access to resources, and social welfare provisions to support women's economic empowerment. Socialist feminists emphasise the need for the state to provide affordable and accessible health and social care, including childcare, healthcare, and education. They argue that these services are vital for enabling women's full participation in the workforce and challenging traditional gender roles. Universal childcare programs aim to provide affordable and accessible childcare services for all families, regardless of their income and socio-economic status. Socialist feminists argue that such programs are essential for enabling women's full participation in the workforce, promoting gender equality and challenging traditional gender roles. For example, in Sweden, they have always been recognised for its comprehensive approach to childcare and family support. The Swedish government heavily subsidises childcare services, ensuring that parents have access to high quality and affordable options. The state also guarantees parental leave, including generous provisions for fathers, which allows parents to balance work and family responsibilities. Lastly, socialist feminists call for the redistribution of wealth to address economic disparities. They advocate for progressive taxation, social welfare programs, and policies that promote income equality to reduce economic gender inequality. A key part of Paper 3 is being able to explain how each key thinker approaches the core theme. At the end of every video on a core theme, we will review how the key thinkers approach the core theme in question. Today, we're going to focus on the state, starting with Simone de Beauvoir. The state reinforces a culture that prevents women from expressing their full and true freedom and identity. Then we have Bell Hooks, a radical feminist who believes the state is dominated by white males and therefore reflects and reinforces their dominant position in society. Sheila Rothbottom, a socialist feminist, says that the state is the servant of capitalism. Charlotte Perkins Gilman is a little bit awkward for this, as she has no distinctive views on the state, but she is a liberal feminist, so does have some issues that are very similar to Simone. Kate Miller is a radical feminist who believes that the state is merely an agent of the patriarchy. It is part of the problem, but not part of the solution.